Prepare yourself for a talk radio experience like no other.
Strap yourselves in and hold on.
Meanwhile, the public's watching Britney Spears getting their Botox. I don't know what to do. You know, I know Jim's actually written about subjects like this, but we're about to get into Bobby here briefly. Jim, I know you've been concerned about these superconducting super colliders, but I've talked to people with degrees, even people who, you know, have got science degrees, and they're not even aware of this, Jim.
Well, what we all need to keep in mind is that back when they tested the first atomic bomb at the Trinity site in New Mexico, this was in the spring of 1945, fully half or more of the scientists working on the Manhattan Project sincerely believed that once they set off a nuclear chain reaction, they would not be able to stop it, and it would eventually catch the atmosphere on fire and would incinerate the entire planet. But they set it off anyway. Luckily, they were wrong about that one. But you're absolutely right, Alex. There's no question in my mind that right now, even as we speak, and even as your listeners are listening, there are deep, secret government laboratories where they are tinkering with the basic energy building blocks of the universe.
Now, let's be clear. In public labs, they're doing things that their own equations say have a good chance of blowing the whole solar system to kingdom come. But blowing is the wrong word. It won't be expanding. It'll be contracting. And that's just one of the threats. And I mean, what is wrong with these people? In fact, they've got that famous documentary from Discovery Channel, The Trinity, where it showed the secret test for the first time where they detonated in one night like 100 high-powered hydrogen bombs in the atmosphere to see if it would set the Earth's atmosphere on fire. I mean, and that's on mainstream television at one night, hundreds of nukes going off in the atmosphere.
And now we're wondering why there's a hole in the ozone layer.
These people, I mean, what is wrong with the New World Order?
That's one reason that they have been dismissing global warming for so long, because once you really look at it, you figure out that it was the above-ground atomic testing that blew the holes in the atmosphere.
There's major studies on that. I tell you, there's not a subject Jim isn't an expert on. We only have about 20 minutes, Jim. Let's quickly get into the two separate articles that have broken two separate camps. The BBC, 3-year investigation, Newsnight, their most prestigious program, basically their nightly news, saying that 4 CIA high-level operatives from Southeast Asia photographed, filmed around Bobby at the time, something you've always said. And then separately, we always knew that the coroner had talked about him being shot in the back, not in the front. And now we have the head of the National Forensic Society and a whole bunch of other top scientists saying, yes, he was shot from the back, not from the front. Boil it down for folks, the two separate camps, then let's go into detail on both sides.
Well, of course, this is actually nothing new. Me and many other people, almost since the time of the Robert Kennedy assassination, have loudly tried to shout out that he was not killed by Sirhan, who cannot remember anything that happened since he was probably brainwashed. But what is happening is, and what makes these stories significant, is that after all these years and after all the further evidence, including scientific evidence, comes out, more and more people are waking up and beginning to realize that the so-called conspiracy theorists were actually right all along, just as we were in the Kennedy assassination, just as we were in the Martin Luther King assassination, just as we were in the
Gulf of Tonkin,
Waco, the bombing of the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City. They're finally beginning to kind of wake up, and it's almost too late, because I know you, like I do, keep up with the economic news, and it does not look good at all. We're just basically, we're a nation that's broke, because according to the government's own statistics, the total government obligations total more than $53 trillion and compare that against the net worth of all U.S. households, which is estimated as just slightly above $40 trillion. So we owe more money than we could possibly ever produce.
That's right. The private bankers created a liquidity bubble that no one, again, it's economists call it a financial black hole. Its mass is so much greater than all real assets, it cannot be escaped. And then the bankers will have a consolidation. The Federal Reserve in 93 and then in 99 publicly changed the rules to allow the criminal lending we have just witnessed that popped the bubble. We said 3 years ago that would start with the housing market. We were right from inside sources, inside Davos and Bilderberg. And now, New York Times, Treasury Department plan would give Federal Reserve more power. Federal Reserve seeks broad authority to oversee financial market stability. And they say with actual less regulation. So they engineer the collapse, and then they play the part of the judge, jury, and execution over their own crime. Jim Marrs?
That's exactly correct. In fact, if you go back and check out the booms and busts of the late 1800s and early 1900s, it was all contrived, and the whole purpose was to create the Federal Reserve System in the first place, which they studiously, up until maybe just a decade ago, refused to refer to as a central bank. And now just all of a sudden you can listen to National Public Radio, you can read the Wall Street Journal, and they refer to the Fed as the central bank. The central bank is an issue that was highly contested since the very founding of this republic. And basically the people have always said we don't want a central bank, and yet now we have one, and nobody ever got a chance to vote on it.
And now we gave the private bankers total control over the fiat currency, and they're going to completely rape us. Jim, though, I want to, in the last segment we've got with you, I know you've written books on it, covered it nauseum. It's old news for you, but it's all over the news now. Walk through exactly how they killed Bobby in the back. Now they've even isolated that it was his gun that did it. I mean, this is mainstream news, but I want to go over how they engineered that and a lot more with our guest on the other side, Jim Marrs. I'm Alex Jones. Jim Marrs is our guest. Jim Marrs is consulting and, of course, in a JFK film I'm putting out. I think we're going to add a little bit about Bobby in there as well. That'll be out in about 6-8 months. You got a new book coming out, too. Are you ready to tell folks what it's about, proving how the whole Nazi system was just transplanted over here, Jim?
Well, that's pretty much the story, except, of course, that sounds pretty outrageous that, oh, wait a minute, we are now the Fourth Reich. But if you'll read the material that I've put together in a new book that's due out here in a couple of months, you'll find the names, dates, places, families, corporations which supported Hitler, and then when Hitler's Third Reich was defeated in World War II, they simply brought thousands and thousands of Nazis and pro-Nazis.
And that's because there was already a huge Nazi apparatus with the Rockefellers over here, the owner, Thomas Watson of IBM, the Bush Senior was the head Nazi bagman of the bank.
The names of prominent Americans who supported Hitler is pretty amazing. You've got Watson of IBM, you've got Henry Ford of Ford Motor Company, you've got Chase Bank and John J. McCloy, you've got the Dulles brothers, you got who are all representing the Rockefellers, Standard Oil. Standard Oil, by the way, had tankers that were refueling German U-boats in the Caribbean in late 1944, almost towards the end of the war. It's always a deal. It's always a business deal.
Well, they put Hitler in power and then set him up.
Right.
I mean, as you know, but that's all mainstream history. I can't wait. I'm going to carry the book on the shopping cart, the bookstore at Infowars.com. Okay, we got about 10 minutes left. Get into the Bobby situation. For people that don't know the basics of what really happened.
Okay, what most people know is that Robert Kennedy, on the very night in June of 1968, when he received the California nomination for president, that pretty well cinched him for the national Democratic nomination. In other words, he was going to be the presidential candidate in 1968. Just a few days before that, before his assassination, he was asked, what can you do about the death of your brother, President John F. Kennedy? And he replied that he couldn't do anything about the death of his brother until he had the powers of the presidency, which tells me he knows what Alex, you and I both know, which is you have to have control of the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, all these other alphabet agencies before you can reveal what actually happened in the Kennedy assassination. But, of course, he never got a chance to do that because walking through a back pantry of the Ambassador Hotel, shots were fired, and he was fatally wounded. Okay, now we all know that. We all know that Sirhan went to trial and is serving a life sentence for doing the shooting. Here's what you need to remember about the Robert Kennedy assassination. Number one, Sirhan never got closer than 3 or 4 feet in front of Kennedy, and yet Thomas Noguchi, a world-class medical examiner, testified under oath in court that the shot that killed Robert Kennedy was fired into his right behind the right ear, hit the right mastoid.
Now, there were 4 shots pumped into him.
Yeah, with 3 in the back, 1 and 1 in the head. And so the thing to remember is that Noguchi said that the shot to his right mastoid behind his right ear was at no more than 3 inches.